to some of that here in a minute. But let's talk about some congressional things. We want to talk about what lies ahead. There you are as the chairman of Financial Services out of the 5th District of Texas. And I want to talk about a couple of things that you guys have on your plate. But first, obviously, still fresh in everybody's mind, because this is something that you guys should have dealt with rather than the White House. Your thoughts on the president's gun ruminations yesterday?
Well, it is a reminder once again that our president has a pen, a phone, a microphone. He just doesn't seem to have a copy of the Constitution. This is part of a pattern that we all know, that we have a very dangerous president who sets dangerous precedents. And what he's doing is frankly eroding our constitutional checks and balances. It is his job to enforce the law, to administer the law, not to make the law. And although we don't know the details, he's trying to stretch them out because he's desperately trying to change the subject from his administration's failed efforts in combating ISIS. I think we know enough to know that the president is yet again trampling upon the Article 1 prerogatives of Congress. That's point number one. Point number two, if what appears to be proposed will be proposed later in the week, it doesn't even get to what the president considers to be the root cause of the problem. But my fear is, once again, he's going to have a chilling effect upon the Second Amendment. We know that already he's attacked the First Amendment when the IRS went after conservative-based groups, totally based upon their First Amendment rights. Now, the president has said that, law-abiding citizens need not worry about their Second Amendment rights. Of course, this is the very same president who said if you liked your doctor, you can keep them under Obamacare, so the president doesn't have too much credibility here. We know already there are plenty of laws on the books for anyone who is engaged in the business of gun sales. You cannot sell to criminals and you cannot sell to mentally incompetent. Now, there is a lot of work, I think, to be done in the mental health area, Mark. But I think this is, number one, the president trampling on our Constitution yet again, and it's the president trying to switch the subject because he is desperately trying to be relevant in the last year of his administration.
Something, maybe it's because we've heard it so much. There's a drumbeat. It's kind of, become a bit of a droning sound that we don't notice so much. But right now, as 2016 begins, on the issue of Obamacare, both the Senate and the House have passed a repeal.
Well, absolutely, and I'm very, very happy that for the first time since Obamacare was passed, we are on the verge of getting a bill on the president's desk. Now, I know the president will veto it, but under a process called reconciliation, which is one of the few ways you can avoid these arcane Senate filibuster rules, you can get a bill on the president's desk with only 51 Senate votes, whereas most matters take 60. I know that's a little inside baseball and perhaps a topic of another show. Why would you know what?
Let's do 30 seconds on it right now. Would you do away with that? Are you a majority rules guy where it should be 51 for everything, or are there some things that there ought to be a higher bar for?
Well, I tend not to tell the senators how to do their business. I don't want them to tell me how to do mine, but I think it's a huge impediment. I'm a majoritarian kind of guy, and I think the rule does more harm than good. And I think that the challenges of the nation are so severe that we cannot have the obstructionism of a handful of senators preventing us from passing laws, for example, that could repeal Obamacare, that could end the funding of taxpayer funding of Planned Parenthood. And so I don't like the rule. Again, I got a lot of respect for Senator Cornyn. I got a lot of respect for Senator Cruz. But maybe your listeners can take it up with them.
Yeah, I hear you. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt the actual headline, which is that with 51 through reconciliation, it goes to the president's desk, where it will surely be met with a middle finger. But there's value in that.
Well, there is value in that, Mark, because number one, this is something that Congress promised it would do, and it lets the American people know in our democracy, little d, if you believe that we should be rid of this scourge known as Obamacare, that for most Americans has made health care less accessible and more expensive and has become an incredible headache and an incredible burden, if you want to get rid of it, we are one person away from getting that done, and that's the occupant of the White House. The proof is in the pudding, and so I think it sets it up nicely, the dichotomy for the American people. If you're for patient-centered health care, you want a Republican in the White House. If you like Obamacare, then, the president's going to veto this bill, and that tells you all you need to know.
All right, let's go Planned Parenthood. Where goes the defund fight?
Well, that's exactly where it goes. Unfortunately, one, I think some people may know there is something called the Hyde Amendment, which at least fortunately prevents federal funding going for abortion. But having said that, we know dollars are fungible, and tragically, dollars still go to Planned Parenthood, not for abortion purposes. But again, dollars are fungible.
Well, but there's the thing. Let's spend 5 seconds on that because it's vital. Because Cecile Richards and all of her henchmen will say, hey, we get that money, but we don't spend it on abortion. Well, if the money comes in, you can split it into whatever pie you like. I always tell the story of the guy who's panhandling and is asking everybody for $5. And somebody says, well, I'm not going to give you $5. You'll just go spend it at the liquor store. And the guy says, oh, no, I got drinking money. and once the money is yours, you may split it up however you like. So that's just really kind of a lie.
Yeah, it has to be put into a segregated account. But the bottom line is dollars are interchangeable. So as a functional matter, we're not achieving what we need to achieve. And listen, I think if every mother in America was exposed to these infamous Planned Parenthood videos, there would be such a outrage, such a hue and cry that every single one of these places would have to be shut down. It's just horrendous, and those of your listeners who've actually seen these videos know exactly what I'm talking about. There is no more fundamental right we have than the right to life, and to think about these people, frankly, some of them, no better term than butchers, that traffic in baby human body parts. It's just unfathomable that this would take place in America. But anyway, the good news is that, well, I guess the bad news is this has been once again filibustered in the United States Senate under this 60-vote rule that we just spoke about. But the good news is that in this process called reconciliation, we are once again going to put the choice before the American people and put a bill on the president's desk that says no more federal taxpayer funding for any organization like Planned Parenthood that is engaged in abortion. It just shouldn't be happening. And so, again, the American people can make a choice. It'll be a clear choice, not an echo.
I'm going to guess in our last few minutes here with Congressman Hensarling, because I asked him, he had a nice and peaceful holiday season, but I'm guessing the people that go through your email might have been getting, and as have the majority of the North Texas Republican delegation, I think only Sam Johnson, John Ratcliffe voted against it. I'm not sure. How are people feeling about that omnibus?
Well, not good. It was an ugly bill. I admit it was an ugly bill.
Wow.
I typically vote against these omnibuses. I reluctantly voted for this one. I typically vote against them because it's a terrible process.
Right.
And the process broke down, and I don't mean to speak ill of the dearly departed, but under Speaker Boehner, this whole thing had broken down, and now Speaker Ryan inherited a bad process where individual spending bills that people can debate and where every member has the ability to have input, that system had broken down. Nothing had moved in the United States Senate. And the bottom line is, Mark, we are a nation at war, and our military has been hollowed out. And there is a price to be paid to make sure that our men and women in uniform have every weapon they need to fight this war against radical Islam.
Okay, so what would have happened? Because I had Brother Burgess on, whom I also love, and that's what he gave me before the holidays. And then I just got barraged by calls, Jeb, just barraged by people who said, look, we have faith that with the coming Republican presidency and people like you and Congressman Burgess, who are all about fighting the war, that we could have stood steadfastly against the omnibus, which gives Obama pretty well everything he wants, and undertaken military spending in some other way.
Well, I'm not sure I buy that. Some people may have more confidence in what the president would do.
Not this president. Oh, no. But listen, we're cutting and running as we speak.
Here's the problem, Mark. The problem is you can't flip a switch with the military. Mm-hmm. When it comes to retention, when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to weapon systems, again, this is a military that's been hollowed out under this president. We finally had an opportunity to begin to rebuild it, and I'm not sure we could put that off for another year while we're a nation at war. Listen, I'll admit it's a kiss your sister kind of bill. It was how cute was your sister on that given day, and I typically vote against these things because it's bad process. It's not a matter of principle. There are good things in the bill, and there are a whole lot of bad things in the bill. And, we got a new speaker who is trying to turn a page, lead us in a new direction, and I'm excited about the fact that 2016 under his leadership, I think, is going to be the year where we put forth our vision of individual freedom, our vision of patient-centered health care, our vision of economic growth through fundamental tax reform, repeal and replace Dodd-Frank, repeal and replace Obamacare, something that we didn't do under the previous speaker. But unfortunately, he came in and this process was broken. And again, people can question, should we have paid a price to fund the military today? Some were not willing to pay the price. I was willing to pay the price.
All right, last thing, because we're obviously eyeballs deep in presidential talk, and we've talked a little bit about the other house over at the Senate. What's the buzz on what happens to the House in 2016, where Republican turnout should be pretty darn strong, no matter who our nominee is? So is there optimism about gaining on, what do we got now, 234, 201? Is there optimism on making that better? Even better?
Listen, I have to be an optimist to be a member of Congress because there's lots of reasons to be depressed and pessimistic up here. But no, we're optimists. Listen, I've served under 3 Republican speakers. Paul Ryan is clearly the most visionary. Paul Ryan is clearly the most conservative. I think he's a great voice and a great face for our party. And while our presidential candidates duke it out, under his leadership, again, I think you're going to see some bold initiatives finally put forth by the Republican Party, and not just being anti-Obama, but talking about what the conservative vision means for working Americans to where their government and their economy are no longer working for them. And so I think under his leadership, the House is going to do fine, and then I look forward to us finally coalescing around some nominee who can ensure that we don't get 4 or 8 more years of Barack Obama, which is exactly what we'd have with Hillary Clinton. So, I'm optimistic about the future, but the sooner we can coalesce around a candidate, the better.
I want to let people put their cars back on the road. I've got constant notes in front of you about the end of every Congress. 234, 201 was the end of the previous one. Right now, we are enjoying 247, 188. And boy, that's even more exciting. Well, is there? I always ask everybody, and I sometimes lose track of. Brother Burgess is a Cruz guy. Brother Barton was a Perry guy, and is now kind of laying back and seeing what happens. What's been your history? What did we talk about last time we spoke?
I'm going to vote for the conservative who can win in November, and as soon as I figure out who that is, you'll be the first to know.
I will hold you to that.
I'm keeping my powder dry.
And there ain't nothing the matter with that, because it's going to be a very interesting month. And Jeb, we thank you. We appreciate you always. Thanks a lot for being on the program.